Stop me if you've heard this one before. Vintage-inspired design made with modern materials and components. There are a ton of watches out there that can claim this. It's that whole what's old is new again. But trust me, you haven't seen anything quite like this one yet. It's the Vario 1918 Pilot's Watch, complete with a beautiful piano black enamel dial, a complicated, historically inspired original design, great leather strap, and a straight Miyota mechanical movement. As far as Pilot's watches go, it's got a lot going for it. But at the same time, some of those things it's got going for it may be reasons you might want to avoid it, as it may wind up being a little bit too historically accurate. But before we get to all of that, I do need to let you know that this one was given to the channel by Vario, and they aren't asking for it back, hence the promotional tag. That said, let's talk specs. This one is a 40mm wide watch with a 48mm lug-to-lug, so I'd say it's mid-sized. The total thickness here is 12.3, and that's from the double dome sapphire crystal to the back of the exhibition case back, which is where you get a glimpse of the Miyota 8N33 movement. Not exactly the best decorated movement in the world, but mechanical is always interesting to look at. And this is an older mechanical movement by Miyota, which means it has a standard beat rate, 42-hour power reserve, but note it isn't hackable, which in this day and age is a bit disappointing. But on the one hand, it is a little more historically accurate, and on the other, well, if you're looking for a straight mechanical movement in this price range, which is $388 US, there's not a lot of options, so you just kind of get what you get. And another thing that is also a tad disappointing is that the total thickness here, that 12.3, does seem to be a tad fat for a straight mechanical, and especially one with only 50 meters of water resistance. Now, some of you who are Vario fans may be looking at this and thinking it looks just a little bit familiar, and you're not wrong, as it's actually based on their 1918 Trench watch, which came out a little over 3 years ago. Vario is one of my favorite micro brands, as they always do things a little bit differently. And the Trench watch is a great example of that. Rather than doing the standard World War II style field watch, they went even more old school, back to some of the very first wristwatches around, those first Trench watches, which were basically pocket watches they fixed lugs to so they could strap it to their wrist. And now, if you haven't seen the review for that, go check it out. And a little while later, they followed up the Trench watch with a larger medic version, and now they have this Pilot's one, which to me is sort of this cross between a Zenith, a Longines A7, and Vario's own Trench watch. In some ways, taking maybe the best of those older style watches and throwing it into something original. Now, the case here is very similar to that original Trench watch, or at least the 40mm version, which is where it has this very curvy, rounded brushed base that flows into a polished bezel, which is then topped off by a domed crystal. And one of my favorite parts about that whole design is just how that curvature continues across all three of those elements. It's a simple thing, but beautifully done, as it adds a nice level of cohesion across, with that polished element framing and drawing you in. And then of course there are the fixed lugs, and yes, I said fixed. It's a very interesting and historically accurate design choice. It's one of the things that made that original Trench watch so special. And like I said, those very first watches, those very first Trench watches, were basically pocket watches they jury-rigged to wear on their wrists. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Now, one slightly different change is with the signed crown position, and that the crown is no longer screwed down. And a lot of that is thanks to the mechanical movement. Mechanicals and screwed down crowns don't always play well together, which is something I've seen firsthand. But more importantly here, the crown has been shifted from a 4 o'clock position to this one at the 2-ish. And kind of depending on your point of view here, you could even consider this to be a 12 o'clock position, as the dial's also been shifted over, or rotated, or tilted, or however you want to describe it, putting this into a very small exclusive club. It's something that's occasionally done on racing watches and a few Pilot's watches, with the idea that they're easier to read if your hands are on the steering wheel or flying a plane and they're on the yoke, and that you're doing something so intensely you can't let go. And with that, you just kind of shift your wrist over, and that 12 in a shifted position actually lines up more with your eye, and therefore easier to read if you're doing that. Now, of course, the downside to all of this is that if you try to read it normally, it might throw you off a little bit, at least at first if you're not used to it. So there's a little bit of a learning curve here with this as well. And this is also where the Longines A7 kind of comes into this design, as it's also a little rotated. However, I think the dial itself, the design here, is a little bit more like a Zenith's Pilot's watch. And that's a design that dates back to the early 1900s. It's a classic pilot's watch, with the larger, older styled font Arabics, a train track chaptering, and a cathedral handset. It's that really early military styling that evolved from the pocket watches of the day, which is really the difference between military watches of World War I and World War II, where back in World War I, there were small touches of elegance and refinement in the design still. Whereas with World War II, it became something that was more mass produced and for everyone. And there, they wound up pushing function over form. But regardless, both designs are easy to read. And here it's all on top of this deep, dark black enamel dial, making a clean, functional, easy to read, and good looking design. Like I said, it's a military style watch with a touch of elegance, which is why over a century later, this type of design is still around and used. And as a whole here, I think Vario created something original, with up-to-date modern components and materials. Yet, it still has a very vintagey feel to it. Now, Vario's created 3 different colorways. You got a blue dial version, this black version, and a white one. And at least with this one, those cathedral hands, which I'm always a sucker for, are clear and distinct over that black abyss. One that the red tip second hand effortlessly glides over, leading to a watch that not only looks great in a vintagey time travel way, but one that's pretty functional as well. It's a design that looks like something that could have actually existed back then, complete with a case that looks like a modified pocket watch. And that's one of the coolest things about it, and I think something that a lot of people will love. I know I do. Which is something I wish I could also say about the Lume, but unfortunately that's one of the few disappointing aspects of the 1918 Pilot. It's one of the more disappointing aspects with Vario in general. Their Lume always seems to be a bit weak. So that is something they need to work on. Because here the dial fades out almost instantly. And the hands, they last a little bit longer, but they don't even last as long as a cheap Vostok Amphibia. So it looks great maybe when you first get into the darkness, but don't expect this one to last very long. Now, this is a pretty interesting watch. It's not your typical military watch, and it's not your typical pilot's watch. At least not these days. And that is one of the things I love about it. And I'm sure I'm not alone in that. I mean, for everyone out there who complains about all the microband divers, here you go. Something different. But at the same time, some of the things that really make this one interesting and different aren't going to appeal to everyone. And that is one of the tricks when it comes to the 1918 Pilot. Like those wired lugs I talked about earlier. Again, some will love this, and I love how they look. But it does really limit the kinds of straps you can use. Basically, no standard 2-piece straps, only single straps and NATOs. And for some, that's going to be a deal killer right there. And the same kind of goes for the button strap itself. While it does look cool and vintagey, and overall it is pretty comfortable, it does add a bit of bulk in what is already kind of a thick watch. Plus, that look isn't going to be for everyone. Not everyone wants to cosplay a pilot or a biker. Luckily though, Vario has designed this one so that you can take that button part off. And the rest of it sort of acts as this 2-piece leather strap, as each of those pieces fold over the lugs and are then secured with small screws. Now the good of this and the bad of this is that the included strap is quite good. It's a nice crazy horse leather, and I use it like this no problem. But this may be the only 2-piece strap that's ever going to work with it. Regular ones won't. And eventually, this one is going to wear out. And at that point, you're just going to have to move on to a single pass or NATO. Which again, can look rather cool. But NATO's always add just a little bit more bulk, just like the button strap. Another aspect like this is going to be the movement itself. To make it more fitting, they went with a straight mechanical. Now, some love mechanicals and some prefer autos. That's already kind of an obvious dividing point. However, what's more important is that in order to keep this watch in this price range, they went up using an older Miyota movement. And for whatever reason, Miyota has recently discontinued the AN33. In the short term, I don't think this is going to be a problem. It's just going to limit the number of watches Vario will ever be able to make with this. But long term, it's also something you should bear in mind, as if there's an issue fixing it 10, 15 years from now, it won't be that easy to find a replacement movement. And lastly, just a nitpick to point out is that there is occasionally a lot of glare and reflection with this one. Between the domed crystal and the beautiful but reflective enamel dial, it's almost inevitable. As for value, these are listed at $388 US. And I think there are two ways to talk about value here. One would be finding a comparable watch and seeing what they're selling for, which with this design is going to be a little hard. I remember with the original Trench, the only watch I could find was a Timex. And the other is to really look at if I'd spend my own money and actually buy one of these. And the thing is, I kind of already did. You see, back when I reviewed the original Trench, I only got to see a prototype. And after I saw that, I had to go buy one for myself. I liked it enough and just had to have it. Now, the original Trench is a little bit different in design and movement, but otherwise it's a very similar watch. And I thought it was a reasonable enough price for an unusual, well-made, vintage-inspired piece. I love field watches, I love military watches, and there's nothing else quite like it on the market out there. And the same goes for the pilot's watch as well. And that's really one of the things I love about Vario, as not only are the prices reasonable, the watches are all unique and very well built for those prices, but also they're very usable. Vario is still primarily a strap company, and they only come out with maybe 2 watches a year. So I think they really take their time to get the designs just right. They're not out to make a quick buck, and they want to take the time to find the balance between form and function, as well as presence and comfort. Which is one of the reasons I keep saying they're one of my favorite micro brands. So, bottom line, it's a great, well-built, retro-inspired watch. And if you're looking for an interesting mechanical or a pilot's watch that's a little bit different, it's hard to go wrong here. Now, as usual, let me know what you think about the watch down below, or if you can think of something similar. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, rewatch the video, do something down below. I'm Shane, this is Relative Time, and I'll see you next time.